The ancient Romans built an empire that reshaped the world. And they did it without a single notification, calendar app, or morning routine podcast. Their work ethic and daily habits were so brutally effective, they still put ours to shame. How did they stay so relentlessly focused and disciplined? Let's dig into their productivity secrets. They might just change how you work forever. In ancient Rome, the streets were quiet at dawn. The air was cool, and the only sounds were the faint murmurs of merchants setting up their stalls and the soft footsteps of senators heading toward the forum. But here's the wild part. The most powerful minds in the empire, emperors, philosophers, generals, had already been awake for hours. For the Romans, morning wasn't just the start of the day. It was the most sacred time for productivity. They believed the brain was sharpest before the city came alive, before distractions piled up, before the demands of the day took over. If you wanted to get things done, you did them before the sun had a chance to fully rise. Take Marcus Aurelius, for example. The guy ruled an empire, led armies, and somehow still had time to write deep philosophical reflections that people are still reading today. His secret? He was up before dawn, writing and thinking in absolute silence. No interruptions, no noise, just focused time to do the kind of work that actually mattered. And it wasn't just the emperors. Regular citizens followed the same mindset. By 6 in the morning, the city was in full motion. Senators were already debating laws, shopkeepers were selling their goods, and craftsmen were deep into their work. By noon, the real workday was mostly over. Imagine that. By the time modern workers are still sipping their second cup of coffee, Romans were wrapping up their most important tasks. It wasn't just about getting up early for the sake of it. There was a strategy behind it. Rome wasn't exactly known for its pleasant weather. The afternoons could get brutally hot, so waking up early meant avoiding the worst of the heat. But beyond that, they saw mornings as the time when the mind was strongest. No distractions, no unexpected visitors, no noise from the crowded streets. It was just you and the work in front of you. Compare that to today. How do most people start their mornings? Hitting snooze 6 times, rolling over to check their phones, scrolling through social media, and dragging themselves out of bed with just enough time to rush through breakfast and stress about being late. The Romans would have laughed at us. They didn't waste their mornings. They didn't ease into the day with laziness. They started strong because they believed how you begin the morning set the tone for everything else. But here's the part that really makes you think. After working hard in the morning, the rest of their day wasn't about more work. It was about living. Afternoons were for socializing, improving themselves, and actually enjoying life. Business meetings didn't happen in stuffy offices. They happened in the bathhouses, where people made deals while soaking in warm water. No stiff chairs, no endless emails, no awkward small talk over stale coffee. Instead, they handled business in the most unexpected place, the bathhouse. Senators, merchants, and military leaders, all lounging in steaming pools, half submerged in warm water, talking politics, trade deals, and power moves like it was just another casual afternoon. No suits, no ties, no desk separating them. Just face-to-face conversations in a place where everyone was on equal footing, literally. How different would business feel today if meetings happened in a spa instead of a boardroom? Would people be more honest? For the Romans, networking wasn't optional. If you wanted influence, you had to show up. No hiding behind letters. No sending messengers to do the talking. If you wanted power, you had to be present, shaking hands, making eye contact, and proving your worth in person. They spent their afternoons reading, debating, or just unwinding. Their productivity wasn't about grinding until exhaustion. It was about being effective when it mattered most, and then making time for the things that made life worth living. Somewhere along the way, we lost that balance. We flipped our schedules upside down, working late into the night, burning ourselves out, and waking up groggy and unfocused. Instead of seizing the morning, we waste it. Instead of working smart, we just work more. But what if we tried it the Roman way? What if we tackled our most important work in the early hours, when the world was quiet? Would we be more productive, less stressed, and much happier? Well, for damn sure we would. But wait, how did they wake up? They didn't have alarms or check their phones for the time. There were no wall clocks ticking away, no wristwatches, and definitely no digital schedules packed with back-to-back meetings. But before I'll tell you all about that, make sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying my content. The truth is, Romans lived by the rhythm of nature. Instead of rigid 60-minute hours, Romans divided daylight into 12 equal parts. That meant an hour wasn't a fixed length. It stretched longer in the summer when the sun was up for more time and shortened in the winter, when daylight fades faster. Time itself adapted to nature, and people simply followed along. No one was obsessed with exact minutes. They measured time in a way that made sense for their world. To stay on track throughout the day, they used clever tools like clepsydra or water clocks. These devices worked by allowing water to drip at a steady rate, marking the passage of time. Judges used them in courts to limit how long people could argue their cases. Military leaders relied on them to time their guards' shifts. Even politicians had to obey them. When the water ran out, their speeches were over, no matter how important they thought they were. And let's not forget that, in Rome, if you said you'd be somewhere at a certain time, you showed up. No rescheduling, no last-minute delays, no blaming traffic. Compare that to today, where running late has almost become normal, and losing track of time is an acceptable excuse. The Romans would have seen that as a failure in discipline. Their obsession with efficiency didn't stop at timekeeping. The way they worked was just as structured. Unlike today's fast-paced, multitasking culture, Romans believed in giving their full attention to one thing at a time. They didn't believe in juggling tasks or constantly switching focus. Philosophers like Seneca warned that splitting attention weakened the mind, making people less effective. Whether it was politics, craftsmanship, or military strategy, the Roman way was all about focused execution. But perhaps the most surprising thing about their work ethic is that they knew when to stop. Romans worked intensely, but they didn't glorify overwork. Burnout wasn't part of their culture. Once their main tasks were done, the afternoons were spent on things that actually enriched their lives: bathing, socializing, reading, and enjoying leisure. But it wasn't just sharp minds and smooth talking that made someone successful. Romans believed that a strong body was just as important as a sharp intellect. A weak body, they thought, led to a weak mind. That's why even the most powerful politicians and philosophers trained in wrestling, running, and combat. Think about it. When was the last time you saw a modern politician in peak physical shape? Can you imagine today's world leaders stepping into a wrestling match or training with soldiers? In Rome, that wasn't unusual. The greatest minds of the empire didn't just sit around debating ideas. They trained their bodies just as much as their intellect. Somewhere along the way, we separated fitness from success. Now, exercise is seen as an extra, a hobby, something to squeeze into an already busy schedule. Now let me tell you that Roman society didn't mess around when it came to productivity. Slaves who didn't perform well weren't just fired, they were punished, often brutally. Roman soldiers who abandoned their posts didn't get a second chance. They were executed, sometimes in front of their own comrades, as a warning. Even politicians weren't safe. If a leader failed to deliver results, they weren't just voted out of office. They could be sent into exile, forced to flee for their lives, or even assassinated. Productivity wasn't just about efficiency, it was about survival. Can you imagine that level of pressure today? What if CEOs who ran companies into the ground didn't get multi-million-dollar payouts, but instead faced exile? What if politicians who made bad decisions actually feared for their lives, instead of just losing a re-election campaign? The stakes in Rome were so high that no one could afford to be lazy. And yet, despite the extreme consequences, their focus wasn't on meaningless busyness, it was on results. So where did this mindset came from? A huge part came from a core Roman value called gravitas. This wasn't just about working hard. It was about carrying yourself with seriousness, discipline, and purpose. A Roman leader who acted too casual, who joked too much, who didn't take his responsibilities seriously. He wouldn't be respected. Being focused wasn't just a personal trait, it was the expectation. Work wasn't something you half did while scrolling on a tablet or daydreaming. If you were doing something, you gave it everything. Look around today, and that attitude is almost non-existent. People take meetings in pajamas. Work calls happen while scrolling Twitter. Attention spans are so short that getting through a single task without checking a phone feels impossible. Can we really call that productivity? Even the way Romans ate showed their no-nonsense approach to life. No long, elaborate meals. No endless snacking. No drowning themselves in sugar and caffeine just to get through the day. They ate quickly and efficiently. Bread, olives, cheese, maybe some dried fruit or nuts. For most Romans, food was fuel, not a spectacle. Meals were practical, meant to keep the body moving without wasting time or energy. But in the villas of the elite, that was a whole different story. If you're curious about the wild feasts, exotic dishes, and how they turned dinner into theatre, check out my other video right after this one. Now compare the food is fuel to modern eating habits. We live in a world where food is a constant distraction. Snack breaks, sugar crashes, endless coffee refills, just to stay awake. Fast food that makes people sluggish. Energy drinks loaded with chemicals just to force focus. Romans would have found all of this ridiculous. They didn't rely on artificial boosts because their energy came from discipline, movement, and sharp focus, not from downing a triple-shot espresso just to function. So, what happened? How did we go from a civilization that lived with purpose, intensity, and brutal accountability to one that's constantly distracted, overindulged, and unfocused? Have we made life easier or just made ourselves weaker? Maybe it's not that we need more productivity hacks or time management apps. Because for the Romans, a powerful mind wasn't something you were born with. It was something you built day by day through discipline and constant learning. The most influential figures in Rome didn't just rely on instinct or charisma. They made reading and writing a daily habit. Books weren't entertainment, they were weapons. Knowledge wasn't just respected, it was expected. A leader who didn't read, a philosopher who didn't write, unthinkable. Many of Rome's greatest figures spent as much time studying as they did lead. They believed that a sharp mind was a trained mind, and the act of writing wasn't just about recording thoughts, it was about refining them. Putting words on paper forced clarity, strengthened reasoning, and kept emotions in check. But reading and writing were just one piece of the Roman discipline puzzle. Their obsession with structure extended into every part of life, especially their daily routines. Order wasn't something that just happened. It was something they enforced. Whether on the battlefield or in the city, structure ruled their lives. The idea of drifting through the day without a plan would have been ridiculous. A person without discipline wasn't taken seriously. Their approach to money was just as strict. Wealth wasn't about showing off. It was about control. Owning more meant relying on others less. Financial recklessness wasn't just a bad habit, it was a sign of poor character. Borrowing beyond one's means was shameful, and dependence on debt was a weakness to be avoided. Their financial mindset wasn't about short-term gratification, it was about long-term security and independence. Even the way they started their day reflected their drive. Before diving into work, they took time to prepare themselves, not just physically, but mentally. Whether through reflection, movement, or setting intentions, their mornings were about alignment, not chaos. A day without a strong start was a wasted opportunity. They understood that focus wasn't something you stumbled into, it was something you created. In a world that now runs on distractions, indulgence, and endless procrastination, it's easy to see how far things have shifted. The Romans built a culture where self-discipline wasn't a rare trait, but a basic expectation. The way people think about work today would have confused the Romans, not because they didn't work hard, far from it, but because they didn't believe in wasting effort on things that didn't matter. They saw work as something to be done with purpose, not something to drag out endlessly just to feel busy. Modern hustle culture has turned overwork into a badge of honor. People brag about their lack of sleep, about how many emails they answered over the weekend, about how they're always grinding. But does any of that actually make them more successful? The Romans would have laughed at the idea that being busy all the time equals being productive. They valued strategy over effort, results over appearances. A Roman wouldn't have cared how many hours someone worked. They would have cared about what was accomplished in that time. They worked in focused bursts, knowing exactly what needed to be done, and then stopped. Not out of laziness, but because rest was just as important as work. Once the critical tasks were handled, they moved on to self-improvement, to learning, to strengthening the body and the mind. A person who never took time to recharge was seen as foolish, not hardworking. Compare that to today, where people feel guilty for taking a break, where rest is seen as a weakness, and where burnout is treated as an inevitable part of success. The Romans weren't interested in staying still. Their entire mindset was built around expansion, not just of their empire, but of their abilities, knowledge, and influence. Stagnation wasn't just looked down on, it was seen as dangerous. A person who didn't grow, who didn't push for more, who didn't strive to be better, was wasting their potential. And in Rome, wasted potential had consequences. Personal ambition wasn't something to be embarrassed about. It was expected. Everyone was supposed to be working towards something bigger. A general wanted to conquer more land. A senator wanted to climb higher in politics. A merchant wanted to dominate his trade. Staying in the same place, doing the same thing, being the same person year after year. That was a sign of failure. Today, ambition is often treated like a dirty word. People are told to be grateful for what they have, to accept their situation, to stop pushing so hard. The Romans would have found that mindset absurd. They weren't reckless, though. Their success wasn't built on blind ambition. It was built on calculated risks, strategic planning, and an unshakable belief in earning power. They didn't believe in shortcuts or luck. If someone rose to the top, it was because they fought their way there. If they failed, they had only themselves to blame. This hunger for growth wasn't just about personal success. It was about the empire itself. Rome didn't survive for centuries by playing it safe. It expanded, adapted, evolved. It didn't settle. It took. Every generation was expected to push forward, to leave the world stronger than they found it. Complacency wasn't just frowned upon. It was a weakness that could bring everything crashing down. Now look at modern life. Comfort is prioritized over challenge. People stay in jobs they hate because they're afraid of the unknown. They stop learning new skills because they think they're too old. They settle into routines that don't serve them because change is hard. The Romans would have seen all of this as surrender. Ancient Rome still influences the world today in ways you might not even realize. Even though the Roman Empire fell thousands of years ago, we can still see its impact in our buildings, language, technology, and even our laws. From massive stadiums to the words we speak, the Romans left their mark everywhere. The Romans were big on architecture, and they weren't afraid to go big. They took a lot of inspiration from the Greeks, but made their own improvements. They kept the fancy columns, but made them more decorative, rather than just functional. They also introduced curved roofs and large arches, which made their buildings much stronger. Thanks to this, they were able to build massive bridges and aqueducts, some of which still stand today. Ever seen a sports stadium? You can thank the Romans for that. They loved entertainment and built huge amphitheaters, like the Colosseum, where people would watch gladiator fights. The shape and seating arrangement of modern stadiums comes straight from Roman designs. And trust me, Roman buildings lasted so long because of their unique concrete. Instead of modern cement, they used volcanic ash and rock, which made their structures super durable. Even underwater, Roman concrete held up better than today's concrete. Scientists today still study it, hoping to recreate its strength. The Romans were master engineers. They built roads so advanced that some are still around today. They're secret. Layers of gravel and big stone slabs that made roads strong and long-lasting. Ever heard the phrase, "All roads lead to Rome"? That's because they built a massive road network connecting their empire. They were also great with water. Romans created aqueducts, giant bridge-like structures that carried fresh water into cities. They even figured out how to use water to power mills and mines. Farming was another area they excelled in. They knew how to rotate crops, prune trees, and irrigate fields to make sure their farms thrived. Some of these techniques are still used by farmers today. And Roman writers? Oh yeah, they changed the game for literature. Poets like Virgil and Ovid wrote stories that influenced famous writers like Shakespeare, Dante, and Chaucer. If you've ever read a play like Julius Caesar or Antony and Cleopatra, that's Shakespeare being inspired by Roman history. And let's talk about language. The Romans spoke Latin, and even though people don't speak it anymore, it never really disappeared. Latin is the foundation of languages like Spanish, French, Italian, and Portuguese. Even English borrows a ton of words from Latin, especially in science, law, and medicine. Ever noticed how the alphabet looks? That's because we use the Latin alphabet, the same one the Romans used. Rome also set the foundation for modern legal systems. Their court system might have been a bit harsh. Okay, a lot harsh. But it worked in a way that's similar to ours today. There was a preliminary hearing where a judge decided if there was enough evidence for a case. If there was, a trial took place with witnesses and evidence presented, just like modern courts. Many countries, including the US and much of Europe, based their legal systems on Roman law. Even some of the terms used in courtrooms today, like habeas corpus and pro bono, come straight from Latin. The difference between the Roman work ethic and today's is clear. They believed in doing work that mattered, not just looking busy. They valued ambition, not complacency. They knew that success required both effort and strategy, not just one or the other. Most of all, they understood that life was about movement, forward, upward, always expanding. So the real question is, what would they think of us? Would they see a world of progress, of innovation, of people pushing limits? Or would they see a civilization that has all the resources, all the knowledge, all the opportunity, but has forgotten what it means to use them? It means to use them.